There is literally nothing more satisfying. I mean, there is, but flicking this open, the sound is, and it looks good, which is half the reason I have this. Function is secondary. Looking good, primary.
What's up, everybody? This is Lloyd Davis. I'm not Peter McKinnon, but it's because of the likes of him that I'm talking to you. And that's because there's a transformation taking place in the media landscape, and it affects us as science communicators. And this is because we are now getting our information primarily from online videos and our entertainment. And the growth in that has been tremendous. Around 300 hours of video is uploaded every minute of the day to YouTube, and some 5 billion videos are watched by 1.3 billion people around the world. Astonishing. And this has taken place in the last 5-6 years or so. So we need to understand that if we're science communicators and utilize it. One of the things we've done in our previous work is we've looked at online videos about science over a year and looked at 826 of them. And as you might suspect, 819, the vast majority, used narration as the primary means of conveying information in the video. That's not so surprising. What did surprise us was, though, when you looked at the style, almost all of them, 84%, used an expository or formal form of narration. But the fastest growing group of online videos, which is YouTube, is like Peter McKinnon, user-generated content. They use an infotainment style. And the difference is that the expository version is often called the voice of God. It's authoritative. And therefore, it's been used in science videos since about the 1920s. However, the likes of Casey Neistat here and Peter McKinnon, they're much more interested in looking good and in being colloquial, humorous, glib in their language. And they use storytelling and humor and personalization to really sell their videos. So what might we predict in terms of the communication of science, depending on the narration type we use? Well, you might expect that the expository one would be more authoritative and therefore more believable. Whereas the infotainment, because it's more engaging, you'd like to think would be more likable. And especially that would be so for those that didn't have a high-level training or education, particularly in sciences like at a university. And that, based on our previous work also, we might think that infotainment was a better vehicle for providing information, therefore for learning. So what we set out to do was create 2 identical videos. They only differed in the form of the narration. One, like this one, had an expository form.
There exists a strong consensus within the scientific community that the Earth is warming, and this is mainly as a consequence of human activities that pollute the atmosphere with tons of CO2 and other greenhouse gases.
The other used an infotainment form.
I'm Jeremy Johnson. I'm a climate scientist, and ironically, I'm freezing my ass off just to prove to you, along with my fellow scientists, that the Earth is getting warmer as a consequence of all the crap like CO2 and other greenhouse gases we are spewing into the air.
And we even had the same narrator for each. We did it both in Spanish and English, and we had 870 respondents to our survey. Fairly equal numbers in English and Spanish, and because they were randomly assigned whether they saw the expository version or the infotainment version, we had pretty even numbers in those too. The survey asked them some questions about their attitudes to science, their personal information such as sex, age and education level, and then questions that included believability and likability, as well as being asked to recall information that was contained within the videos. what we wanted to do was make sure that these predictive variables, like the narrative version or the sex of the person or the age or the education level, that they didn't have somehow, they weren't affecting each other. And we ran a generalized linear model and found that, in fact, there were no significant interaction effects between the two. So therefore, we could set about using two-factor ANOVAs to test any interaction that occurs between the narration version and these other predictive variables in terms of the likability or the believability of the videos. And the results, in summary, indeed, the expository version was more believable. However, we didn't find that the infotainment version was more likable, even though we hoped it would be more engaging. And this may have been because we had a very high sample of university-educated people in our sample. And indeed, if we looked at only those without a university education, yes, they actually preferred the infotainment version. And it didn't matter what your education level, people learned better when they were shown the infotainment version. And you can see this in this figure here. The black squares are the infotainment version, and people that saw the infotainment version did much better, or consistently, significantly better at recalling information than those that saw the expository version. And the other thing you'll note, and it's a bit sad if you make videos, is the further down the video you go, the less chance you have that anyone will recall the information. So, what conclusions can we draw as science communicators? First, if you want to be believable, the expository style of narration is really good for that. However, if your aim is to get to parts of society that are not so well acquainted with science, and this will often entail people that don't have a university education, then an infotainment style is going to be a preferable tool to use. Furthermore, if your purpose of your communication is to actually convey information, then infotainment is a better way of packaging it. So, finally, we have to be aware that a cultural revolution is actually taking place in society right now as we switch to online videos. And as science communicators, it behooves us to understand this process and indeed then to use it for our own purposes. If you want to know more about that, look at our Public Understanding of Science paper. Otherwise, thanks for watching, or as Peter McKinnon would say, peace!